Welcome to Tracking Engagement with Google Analytics. I'm Daniel Fenton. This is my colleague, Markham Schaffner. We are engineers in the Washington, D.C. R&D Center. Work primarily on the ArcGIS Hub product. But today we want to talk to you about how you can track engagement with Google Analytics, how you can wire up your own apps to get information about what's going on with your users, and how you can leverage that information. So talk about this concept of tracking and telemetry and why do we want to do it. Like this rover, we're sending our code out into the world, but we're not going with it, right? We need to have eyes and ears to know what our users are doing in the app. So just like this rover is loaded up with all kinds of sensors, it's got cameras and drills and lasers, we want to do the same thing with our application, add sensors to it. What are people clicking on? What are they searching? What pages are they viewing? How did they get there? These are all important things for us to know how our applications are being used. We want to be able to spot problems. For example, there's a higher bounce rate for a given route. So a bounce means that a user came onto your site, they did nothing else, and they just left, right? That's a not very engaged user. So this is analytics from the Hub app that actually shows when users land on a page, so like a / page that's not another piece of content like search or an individual data set, they bounce about 20 percentage points more than when they land somewhere else. So that's a problem. It's one that we're actually already addressing by building in better navigation. But we learn about these problems through analyzing the telemetry that we get from our application. We use this data to make decisions, like which browsers should we support. This is a table showing usage of different versions of IE, every developer's worst nightmare. Should we still support IE 8? Well, 219 sessions out of 159,000 last week use IE 8, so I think not. But IE 11, yes, we'll continue to support that. So it's important to have this data so that you're not, making arguments blind about, well, we shouldn't support IE because I don't know anyone that uses IE. No, you can actually get the data and then make proper decisions. And then planning. Like, when should we perform maintenance? This is a chart showing the hourly usage over the last week. You can see weekdays and then weekends, but we want to do our maintenance during the week. So when's the best time? It looks like at 1 a.m. every night, usage bottoms out. Right? So that's the best time to do some disruptive maintenance where the fewest users will be affected. You don't have to guess. We know this by looking at the data. So with that setup, I want to hand it over to Markham, who's going to talk about how you actually wire up your app to collect this analytics, or telemetry as we call it.
Thanks, Daniel. Can anyone in the back not hear me? Or I guess, can you hear me? Can I get one thumbs up somewhere? No, not very well. A little closer. What about now? Better? Okay, let me button this button then. Get a little tighter. Okay, cool. Thanks. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the setup. And the main takeaway I want you to have from my portion is that it's not that hard to do. Don't feel the need to memorize the steps that I go through or the things that I say right now. This is a resources slide of things that I have found valuable in setting up Google Analytics. Again, this deck will be available. Take photos if you want to, but we'll have it online, so you'll be able to have these links. And anything from Google's own Getting Started page to the Google Analytics users group, which will be able to answer more advanced questions and has over 250,000 users now. These are all things that can help you go from zero to wherever you want to go with your analytics strategy. And you can start to answer questions like, how do you stand up your account? How do you grab a tracking ID? How do you inject those needed scripts into your web page? And what to do once you've covered those basics. So before we go too much farther, I just want to say what Google Analytics is. Daniel talked about telemetry and why tracking is valuable, but Google Analytics is the solution that our team uses. It's a freemium web analytics software offered by Google. It's been around for a little over 10 years, and it tracks and reports website traffic. And it's the most used analytics service on the net right now. And at the root of it, what Google Analytics does is it takes out the management layer of you needing to hand roll your own scripts or databases that track events. Rather, it provides a script for you and a tracking ID that sends off a lot of these page views automatically and stores them somewhere, inserts, makes these events searchable and sortable in a way that you don't have to handle a lot of these painful parts of data management, but rather just a thin slice of it and then let Google do its googly things to improve your own decision-making capabilities. So let's say you've got your Google account, you're synced up with Google Analytics, and the first thing you'll see is probably a lot of zeros because you haven't actually tethered your work to any live page or site or app out in the wild. So what you need to do is go to the admin tools and get your tracking ID, which is a unique ID that'll be related to like whatever your property is, whether it's your app or your site, your page, that will create this two-way relationship between what you have out in the wild and Google's database. It's the unique identifier that they attach to all of the page views that's coming in. It's how Google knows that the events coming from my site are coming from my site and not from Daniel's site. And if you look closely at the end of this, at the tail end of this tracking ID, you'll see that -13, and that's because this is the the 13th ID that I was using, and you can use up to 50 on the free account. So that's something I think a lot of people won't hit. Even if they're using it for enterprise level solutions, and that's just the freemium availability. So to dive in a little deeper, here's the script that I mentioned. It's also in the admin tools, and if you blow it up at this, it's not very many lines of code. You basically put it in any head tag of every web page that you would want to track, and it's sort of a global tagging script that will shoot off information, including, if you notice in this bottom section, the ID that we showed on the last page. And the site tag provides a streamlined way to tag across Google, the sites and the conversion tracking and all that type of thing that you want to do. It gives you a greater amount of control and makes your implementation fairly easy. So that's sort of a static way that you can achieve this. But what we have done, and what a lot of folks will do if they write a single page application, which is just a fancy way to say like a bigger web app, is inject some of this logic at the root of your application where you'll send off, and the important line here that I'm trying to highlight is this log page view function that will shoot off the current URL you're on and just an object of options that will provide information around where you are. And at the end of the day, this is really valuable because with just a few lines of code, you can send off a really descriptive set of information about the way people use your web page. So it's a passive way to tell Google Analytics not just, hey, 100,000 people or 10,000 people or 100 people, however many folks were on your page today, it can say, these 10 people were on the search route for a few minutes, or like these 100 people were on the search route and they'd searched for water. So it's like a programmatic way for your app to break itself down and send off information about, the nested routing structure where someone is, or whatever the query parameters that they've been using are. And so that was sort of a passive page views type of discussion. And this is the part where I want to talk a little bit more about active events. So it's not just where somebody spent time on your app, how much they spent time on your app. It's what did they do when they were there. So it's like, did they click this button? Did they not click that button? And you can articulate these type of events that you want to send off on button presses or form submissions or whatever it is that your app is doing. You can articulate out what will be sent off. So let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of an event. As you can tell, it can be a fairly simple object that has a category, action, and label structure. And the category is a name that you supply as a way to group objects that you want to track. So sort of the highest level description of what these objects might be, whether it's like, hey, these are search events, or hey, these are download events. And then the action is the next level down. It gets a little bit more specific. It's what you use. It's a parameter to name that type of event to make it more easily sliceable and queryable as you look to compare events across whatever nomenclature you end up deciding on. And then there's the label. This one's actually, the third level is optional. I would still suggest that you use it. It doesn't really hurt to gain additional information about events. Something that's fairly common that we do would be to say it's a download event. You could put in the name of that download. So like, what is the file that's being downloaded? We'll call that the label. And on the front end, before you actually start writing these events, I would encourage you to invest just a little bit of time in whatever your nomenclature or hierarchy is, because the more consistent that is as you go deeper into this analytics experience, the more valuable it is. So keeping your names with some sort of consistent and useful naming system can save you time on the back end. And at the end of the day, you'll end up seeing things like this, how many users you've had over the past month, and how many active users are on your page right now, and then those active pages on the right with these, search or pages and route conditions, and where people are viewing it from if they're using a mobile device and that sort of thing. So before I hand it back off to Daniel to go into the ins and outs of what I'm showing in PowerPoint here, I want to let you know that there's one more thing that Google Analytics can do. It's not just hey, let's shoot information off to Google Analytics and then view that information in Google Analytics. You can also have a two-way relationship where you pull that information then back into either your app or some sort of third-party location. And so with a simple fetch request to Google's Open API and the proper tokens so that you can verify you should be able to get said information, you can ingest that data from Google Analytics and start to represent it in whatever form or fashion that you want. So here's an example of something our team built in the last few months. It's a dashboard that goes and grabs, as related to a specific item, the views and the sessions that have been collected by Google Analytics that we have sent off. And so we're choosing to show that here as sort of an example of what you can do in your own code, should you choose to. Yep.
Thanks, Markham. So I'm going to take this time now to go deeper into the Google Analytics UI, show you some of the key features of it and kind of top places I go to get insights when I'm looking at the Hub application or our documentation website or anything like that. So this is the homepage for the analytics view. And the first thing to look at here is this property selector. We have a lot of different environments. You might have a few, dev, QA, and production. Tend to keep things separated out using a different analytics key, so I can go and look at our QA or our dev, or I can look at our doc sites. That selector is done here. This is the homepage where Google's actually done a lot recently to bring a lot of the popular insights right to this page. So you can look at your sessions and break that out over, do I want to look at this as the last year? Some things like referrals, and now they're adding other insights to this, like your site has increased users by 7% over last week. So they're doing a lot there and adding a lot of value, so you don't have to be an expert. So this is the real-time report, and I used this morning to track how a new feature we released was going. I was specifically looking at events in real time. So Markham talked about these two categories, really. You have page views and you have events. Page views, anytime someone loads a page, it's fired automatically, either by your single page app or because you've got Google Analytics in the head. Then events are things that you actively track. So someone clicked on something and you're choosing to send that information back. So I was looking at the last 30 minutes where there are a lot of error events coming up here. So useful in real time to track how a new feature is rolling out. What pages are people landing on? So in the last 30 minutes, did we have a lot of 404s popping up or things like that? Audience tab is one that I use all the time just to see how are we doing for usage in general. And now we're getting to one of these pages that has a similar pattern as other pages for controlling what data that you're looking at. So you have these here segments. That is basically filters of your overall data. So by default, you look at all users, but if I wanted to look at a segment like bounced sessions, we talked about bounces before, and how does that compare, I can select that here and apply, and it's going to show comparisons between overall and those bounced sessions. So we can do comparisons between different segments. We can also change our time. So maybe I want to look at the last 30 days and I want to compare that to the preceding month, or actually what I like to do quite a bit is it's fighting with me. I like to compare to the previous year because things are seasonal. in February, the previous month was January. A lot of people are on vacation. There's less people using the site. So if it looks like you have a lot of growth, it's just because that's the way traffic naturally progresses. And you can see that when you look at these annual comparisons. I don't know why it just popped up now. But now we can see kind of the previous year. So how is our growth really doing? Overall sessions is like a really key metric to look at. It's a lot better, in my opinion, than just page views or even unique page views. A session is anytime someone uses the app one or more pages within a 30-minute period. So if I go and I click around several times, that's one session. If I come back 2 hours later, that's another session. So it's kind of an overall measure of general usage of your application. Some other useful things in here, like the bounce rate that I talked about, returning viewers, all useful. Active users, that's often a key measure for apps. What's our daily active users? What's our monthly active users? Let's pull that comparison off. So we can see, daily 25,000 active users, but monthly 456,000 active users. So it looks like people kind of come once for a thing, and many people come over a month, but not that many people, are coming every day. Some other interesting things in here are technology. That's how you look at the browsers. So I was showing, are we mostly Internet Explorer or are we mostly Windows? What do we need to prioritize fixes for? Looks like it's pretty fine that we spend most of our time developing in Chrome because that matches our users at 60%. Internet Explorer, good to check out. Safari as well, but it's okay that our developers are mostly working in Chrome. And then you can also see things like mobile versus desktop. How's that going? So, the hub site or applications are used predominantly on desktop. We have strong mobile growth, and you can see that when you do that year-over-year comparison. You can see that actually mobile is growing faster than desktop, even though desktop is much greater in magnitude. There are some other things that are useful that I can't go into in depth just because this is a really short demo session, but users flow is interesting. That shows you how people are navigating through your site. If you just have one site that's a lot less complicated, like ours, this is going to make a lot more sense because this is analytics for like every site in the hub platform, which is thousands of them. We could see where people are dropping off. So how do people move through from different countries? You can break this thing down for different browsers and other things. So mobile, where are we losing people? Acquisition's really useful, and acquisition is useful alongside a tool called Search Console, which is a second tool that I also don't have time to go into, but is great kind of further reading that tells you how queries are leading to search clicks and people landing on your site. But you can see, how are they getting there? Mostly direct, some referrals. If you click on referrals, you can get to and see the top referrals. So in the last week, catalog.data.gov sending in a lot of traffic. All these things you can look at year over year, or comparing some other period, which is really useful to see like how's our organic growth doing, for example. So if we compare to the previous year, we know that we actually did a really good job in the last year with SEO. Our numbers weren't as high as we wanted them to be, but you can see our strongest growth in referrals was from search engines, which means a lot of the effort we put into SEO was really paying off. Looking at the percentages before a year ago is when we determined, wow, we really need to work on and fix some things about our SEO. And now we see through this that it's working well. Behavior is perhaps my favorite tab on this application because this is what shows the events, and this is where, as developers, we pour most of our energy in using Google Analytics into events. What do we want to know about? It's not just simply clicks, but it's more like what is the user actually doing? So we have these high-level categories that we can look at in top events. So data, search, and download. We want to know, for example, how often people are paginating through dataset tables, how often they are looking at our charts. So things like, wow, we really thought that the chart feature was going to be more popular, but it's not very popular. Should we move it up the page? And this is how we make decisions on our team through research and analytics. We'll make assumptions, test them, validate them, and track how things are going. But I can go through and so you're seeing the event action there. What's cool is if you do the event label, you can get that level of detail. So we always label things with the name of the data set where possible. And that the reason we do that is so that you get a usable interface here, right? So it's not just an ID. I can actually see that in the last week, the most popular thing that was downloaded was a data set called parcels and then Vision Zero safety. I can go in and I can drill down. So if we want to see, for example, what is the most popular file geodatabase download? So the hydrography watercourses is the most popular file geodatabase download. I can drill down into that further and see how that's doing over time. I can do the same year-over-year comparison. I can compare this to other metrics like sessions. So how is this going as sessions go? Are they correlated? And I can also use the different segments for this. Useful features here as well as saving reports and things like that. Any one of these screens that I'm looking at, I can save as a report that I can come back to later. I can share as a PDF. I can email there. And then there's a custom report editor that, this is definitely an advanced feature, but I just want you to know that it's here. Whenever you're kind of looking at things and you're not seeing like the exact metric that you want to see, like maybe you have a custom metric or you don't want to know the number of sessions, you want to know something else. The Google Analytics interface is super flexible, and you can do a lot with these, with editing these and making them custom reports. But it's definitely a deep topic that I'd recommend reading up about. Site search is something that we make a lot of use of as well. So this is something that you get for free if you configure it correctly. In the admin tools, there's a setting, actually don't have time to show it, but there's a setting in admin tools where you tell Google Analytics what are the search routes and what are the query parameters. So for us, it's like Q equals and tags equals. And then that's what gets populated into the search term. And then you get analytics to say like, what percentage of the time do people search for something and then immediately leave, right? So that's one of our key metrics that we look at to see, how useful is search. We want this search exits number to be going down over time for sure. So if I look at percent search exits and compare that again, previous year. And with the new search feature that we launched this morning, this will be something that we're tracking to see how we're doing year over year. We didn't make a ton of changes up until literally today. We just launched something completely new. And so we'll be watching things like previous period to see how this new feature is going. Looking at specifically like search exits. We want to see fewer refinements because it means that we're presenting the best results first. We want to see kind of higher time after search because it means that people are using what they've found. So really, really useful stuff in there. Site content is also really important, and it shows you what pages people are actually viewing. So the top pages are actually, like overall in Hub, this road conditions page is like super popular overall. So I just added a secondary dimension here that's just going to tell me where this road conditions thing is. Now, this is kind of an advanced use case to look at the host name as a secondary dimension because we have a lot of different URLs that are sending us analytics, but you can bring in other things like the acquisition. So, how did they come in and then what pages are most popular? So, overall, people coming to /datasets direct is the single most used piece of content on the site. Same goes for, so road conditions, people are mostly getting to that one by Googling it. Right, so I'm able to learn these things so that I can make decisions. Site speed, also really important to see how quickly things are loading actually in the wild. So you get kind of sample data. So our average page load time is 3 seconds. That's pretty good, actually. And see how some of these things are performing over time. There's actually one other thing I wanted to show with the time I have left, and that's the user explorer. So this thing is actually really cool, and it lets you in an anonymized way see what people are actually doing on your site. And this is where these events become really important. And you can actually see kind of page by page. This is one of our top users. They came in through a social link. They viewed this different data sets. They searched, they viewed another data set, and actually kind of see what are they doing, specific users. So a lot of the same features, we go back, like the different segments. So I want to like follow the session of someone that used our new publishing workflow. I want to see how they actually did, or I want to segment this down to people that canceled our publishing workflow. What are they doing that led them up to a cancel? So the data in this user explorer is really rich. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, that's what I'm going to. So I just want to point out, and this will be in the deck that we share out, this is a really deep topic, and there is obviously a lot more to share, but some things that you should know about. Custom metrics and dimensions. So you want to measure something beyond category, action, and label, like an item ID, or whether the user is signed in or not. The Google Search Console lets you analyze how people are getting to your site via Google. Google Data Studio lets you make super powerful and flexible custom reports. There's a koop provider for Google Analytics that lets you turn your Google Analytics into a feature service, and then you can analyze it in tools like Insights, or that's how we build our dashboard. There's a Google Analytics Query Explorer, which teaches you how to use the API. And there's Google Tag Manager, which is kind of a meta-programming way to add tracking onto your sites. These all have links, so you can get to them when we share this deck out. And with that, I just want to open it up to any questions.
The way you were able to track all that was based. I wanted to be clear that the way that you were able to track all that is that you were explicitly providing information back to Google as users operated features. It was not based on the routes in the URL changes, right?
The events were based off of things that we had explicitly tracked. The page views, the bounce rates, the operating system, the search, that's all actually done automatically through page views. So page views will get you a lot, but it won't get you events.
So if you wanted to see, single page, single URL, but you wanted to track the way a particular dialog box was operated, you would have to be explicitly sending events for that.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
It's sort of the difference between passive information and actively shooting it off.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. That's great for everyone doing, I guess, standard web app development. Is there anything for like web app builder or that you can kind of link analytics in on that?
There is not, but that'd probably be a good thing to ask for. I know a lot of the teams are building in our telemetry library into their applications. They're not yet exposed from a customer perspective, but great thing to ask for. Yeah.
Hey, I don't think we have much of we don't have a buffer between this one and the next one. So if you have questions, just meet us out there because I think the next talk is starting in about 35 seconds.
Okay, well.
Coming. That was fun.